Alan laid out some of the background to what we're doing. We have an opportunity here today to do one or two things. I could either take you through what we did with Flow in Premier, how product Flow, the survival vision, implementation, but I don't think that that really pays homage to the favor that Ellie did us. He had this unbelievable ability to ask just that one question that you really don't want. He did so with incredible honesty and with empathy, and I think it would be a shame if we don't do the same today. Keep in mind that I was on the side of being a client, and these days I help some companies to implement TOC. So I've sat on both sides of the fence, and I probably am familiar with the position that most of you find yourself in as we talk about these things. Now, PremierFoods, just quickly, just so you can get an idea of the supply chain, we bought 1.5 million tons of imported and local wheat and corn. We took that into 8 molds, where we molded into flour. 1/3 of that product went directly to industrial customers. These are people that use the product to produce their own on their side. It's fairly simple. It's replenishment. You take a big truck there, make sure they don't run out. 1/3 of the product we took either directly or through distribution centers to what we call formal wholesale or formal retail. There it gets sold to consumers that use it to bake product in the home. The last third of the product we took to 11 bakeries where we baked about 1 million loaves of bread every day. We put that on 700 trucks and we delivered that to 30,000 outlets on a daily basis before 10 o'clock every morning. That went either to formal retail or something I'll show you just now that we called informal retail. At the end of this, we estimated that our product touched the lives of it fed 10 million people every day. So it wasn't an inconsequential business, and it's a complex supply chain. Alan referred to our paper-thin margins. This is a staple food company. On the milling product, we made about a 25% throughput percentage. On bread, because we occupy 2 places, both milling and baking, we made about 50%. But it's only 1/3 of our turnover, so our blended throughput percentage was around about 30%. One of the first things I would do if I get anywhere near TOC again is I would not touch a company with such a low throughput percentage. Just to get you a sense of what we were dealing with, when you talk about formal market, and it looks like just the downtown, same as the downtown area of most American cities. In there you would find normal retail shops like the Costco's, etc. Here, I suppose, where things are stacked on a rack and drops, and they're replenished out of the back room. Nothing difficult to understand here. We did replenish the flour products about once a week because they're medium shelf life products. They don't need to be replenished every single day. There was quite a lot kept in the back door. Bread, however, is a perishable product. You either sell it on the one day, it's like a hotel room. If you don't sell it day one, it's gone. So we had to replenish that on a daily basis. When it gets to informal markets, I think my friends here from developing markets would probably understand these a little bit better. I think Robbie, for instance, would have a much better idea. There you get small traders. This is what we call a spazo shop. It's typically a small tin shack. This particular one has a caravan. There's some signing up, and you can find them on a day-to-day basis. There are about 200,000 of them spread around South Africa. We reached about 30,000 of them. They get a little bit smaller as well. This guy goes every day, and he builds that little structure, and you deliver to him. He tends to be in the same place, not too much of a challenge. And then my personal favorite are roving traders, people that set up next to a road. And then they're there, and the next day they're just gone. So you want to build a stable system to do delivery. It's a bit of a new challenge for most people. And to give you a further sense of what it looks like, you remember Sandton? Just 3 kilometers down the road is a place called Alexandra. That's what Alexandra looks like. You can see that any GPS-based truck is not going to be much help there. It's chaos. It's very difficult. It's a very complex environment. Here we didn't really sell milling products. It was only bread, and we did daily replenishment. Typically, people buy bread here before they go to work, if you haven't delivered the product by 9 o'clock in the morning, it's over. You try again the next day. The bread trucks typically started leaving the bakery about 1 in the morning to reach these outlets. Now, why change Premier? I think Alan summarized that very nicely. It's not a particular mystery. I was appointed in March of 2004 from outside the company, and within the first week of me arriving there, we declared a loss of equal to 10% of our turnover. Ellie once asked me, "Why did you go there?" I said to him, "Because I couldn't figure out how I could break it more than it was broken already. I could do almost anything." And that was after a decade of losses. So we informed our long-term creditors that there wasn't a reasonable prospect that they were going to be paid on time. The business was basically bankrupt. So to change it, it wasn't really an option. It didn't, it was the best part of a 2-minute discussion. If we want to have a look and see what the lessons are from Premier, we need to go back a little bit and ask ourselves what TOC is. Because there are two aspects that we applied there. And it seems like the unifying principles of everything in physics, the definition evades us. Have you ever heard one? There seems to be two aspects to it. One is flow, and the second one is thinking. The whole thinking suite of tools, right? If you'll also just bear with me, I'm just going to look at a generic supply chain quickly because it'll save us some time later. Typically, what you have in a generic supply chain doesn't have to look exactly like this. This is just a rendition. You have suppliers that have little volatility, normal distribution curve, and all the things that they supply to you, both in quantity and time, etc. You then go into a manufacturing plant where you basically faced with exactly the same sort of challenges. Into warehousing where the same thing happens, then retail. And what happens in a conventional supply chain is that product is typically pushed. And we try and optimize every step along the way. That's why local optimas come from this, where the cost will come from, right? And the entire purpose for this is to serve this person here, this end user. Now, these are particularly pesky people because we have this wonderful machine planned for them that delivers these large batches of things, and then they pitch up there and they don't seem to know what they want. It's pricing today. They want this one. They don't know what they want before they walk into the store. So their distribution looks something like this. They may buy one thing, you don't know which one, and they may buy a second one, less than the first one. Very unpredictable. Business really would be a lot easier without them. If you look at a TOC supply chain, what we do is we turn it around. We say, this is the true constraint. This is the only thing you don't have enough of. Everything else you can solve, right? And how do we do that? Well, we turn the logic around. We do demand-led forecasts. We pull product according to demand rather than push it. What are the steps involved in that? You know them well. We hold a greater number of items in a smaller quantity in the final point of contact with the consumer. Secondly, we go and we centralize, we pull back inventory into warehouses, and we keep greater buffers there. We then build a very quick distribution system to make sure that if people want stuff, it's there, right? Let's not forget about manufacturing, or wherever this lives. We look for bottlenecks in our supply chain. We build buffers in front and behind it, and we continually improve the flow through that. In our world, all the blue areas were under our influence, and the gray ones not. TOC, what is important, however, is that we do a TOC intervention from that side. Whilst we let the product be pulled, we push the implementation. And why is that? We assume that in order to ensure availability, you've got to get a product through manufacturing first. If it doesn't go through that, you can't get it on retail shelf, right? So one possible definition of TOC, the flow part of TOC, it's a way to improve flow through dependent and volatile steps to increase the achievement of overall goal units. Now, a lot of the presentations at conferences like these go about or deals with flow. It is our hammer. And like Thor, we really, really like this hammer. Everywhere we go, we see nails. So the Premier TOC implementation, the viable vision implementation, it looked like every other one. We went and we did the education processes first. We did those 4x4 workshops. We implemented throughput accounting. In fact, throughput accounting was in place before we got Goldratt involved, because myself and the COO, I did a finance degree, and I think I flunked cost accounting because I just could never understand how you could take fixed cost and allocate that to a unit. I didn't get it. So for us to go to throughput accounting was fairly easy. And then on the flow side, we put some reports in. We found that when we got there were 30,000 reports produced every day. We tried to get people to stop using them. It didn't work, so one day we just switched them off, and we gave everybody TOC reports. We still had problems getting people to understand TOC, and then we did another thing. We put some incentives behind those measurements. 1 week. Everybody understood. Very quick. Secondly, we did drum buffer rope. We did that firstly in the milling environment, then in the bakeries, the production, packaging. We used Symphony to do that. Lastly, we did drum buffer rope in procurement. We did dynamic buffer management after that in the milling distribution. And once we were finished with that, we could do the sales solutions. Now, the interesting thing is it took us about 3 to 4 years to get to a point. You can't really start offering availability until you put all of that in place. So to get to beginning of dynamic buffer management took a while before we could guarantee that we could have bread available. It took us even longer to get to milling availability. So we built this machine in good faith that at some point in time, it'll deliver for us. Our first major lesson was this. It took way too much time to see if this machine could do something. So if you do all of these things, you would expect a material increase in sales, right? Well, let's have a look. This is our milling products volumes from 2005 to 2011. Nothing happened. Why? Well, there were 2 reasons. The product that we were making available in that space is a medium shelf life product. And we found we had strong brands. We found that our customers, the retailers, were buffering us. They were keeping more stock at the back door to compensate for us. And all that happened when we replenished that product is we allowed them to start cutting down the buffer in the back store. Product on the shelf did not change. Slightly disappointing. The second lesson we therefore learned was validate your assumptions before you go to all this effort. Make sure that that which you think you're going to access here actually exists. And if it exists, that it works. On the bread side, how did we do there? Well, a little better. On the formal market bread, volume increased by 42%. Why was that? Well, it's a short shelf life product. It's impossible to buffer it from day to day. So if we don't deliver it, it's not on the shelf, it doesn't sell. We used to call it, we said we have an underhanded strategy. You're not buying a Ferrari when you go to buy a loaf of bread. If the hand goes out and the bread's not under it, it doesn't sell. Simple as that. So here we got our arms around availability in store, and these were formal stores that respond to the sort of principles that we apply. So we had a fairly good response there. And keep in mind, this was a higher throughput product as well, so that helped with profitability. However, the biggest opportunity that we have, 2/3 of our bread goes through informal market. We only had a 5% increase. Why was that? That picture that I showed you of Alexandra, there's a mafia at work, a distribution mafia in those townships, where routes and customers are allocated. And I sometimes wake up in cold sweats, panicking that I still have to go back and fix this. Because it's a very dangerous environment for people to break ranks on that. We lost drivers fairly constantly. A couple of drivers got killed every single year. And one of my biggest failings was we weren't able to create an incentive that was worth more than our drivers' lives. And we just could not change the behavior to the extent that we wanted to. However, over the 7.5 years between April 2004 and November 11, where did the profit come from? Premier showed a 7,300% return on investment in its ordinary shares. It was 73 times what it was when we got there. This was the highest of any other company listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And keep in mind that this is not a startup company. This is a 160-year-old staple food company. So if we didn't get it out of sales, where did it come from? And how did TOC contribute to that? Well, if you look at the throughput per unit, on milling product, it more than doubled in the period that we were there. It shot up by 144%. On bread, there's 1 year less here, but it went up by 70%. So where did that come from? Don't get hung up too much on the graph that I'm going to show you. The advantage that we had is we had very comprehensive data. We had throughput accounting, and we had some very clever business intelligence people. So that allowed us to really pull our business apart and see where we were making money and where not. This graph here, all that it does is on the horizontal axis, it shows you how many rands or dollars we were making per clients. Those bubbles are individual clients. On the vertical axis, the total throughput that we made with them, and the size of the bubble would be the turnover that we made. We analyze these figures, and for instance, two that stick out on this graph is here you have a client that does very little turnover with us, and we have almost no throughput per unit. Why is that? Well, it was a legacy of some old deals that were done. We were selling lower grade product to them. On the other hand, over there sits a very profitable client, almost obscenely so, and we focused on them and figured out how we could do more business with them. It's difficult in this environment. Those mills are expensive. We had very strong competitors. It's very difficult to gain significant market share without eliciting a price war. So we cherry-picked in this environment. This was one way. The second graph is we tried to build a global optimization software to which we could explain our entire supply chain. We asked a very simple question. We said, where do we mill what, for whom, and how do we get it to them? We couldn't get this thing to work for 2 years because the number of permutations that comes out of those little 4 questions happened to be about 1,000 times the number of stars in the universe. We eventually managed to crack it. The constraints that we put on the system is what is the most profitable way to do this while still ensuring 99% availability. We managed to build this machine, and it was a significant competitive advantage, and I still think to this day our competitors have not managed to match that. This is just an illustration of a very small portion of the flow in our business that we explain to the software package. As I said, don't worry too much about this. I'm not suggesting that you go down this path because it's an anathema to TOC. There was also a little bit of a milling volumes quality switch. You'll see the middle here there, 2008. We upgraded some of the quality of our manufacturing, and we started manufacturing less lower grade product and more higher grade product. So in 2008, we lost that volume, and it wasn't really profitable volume. And from 2008 to 2010, as you can see there, we did find some traction through these initiatives and through making product available. So it's not entirely true to say that nothing happened. The last thing that happened to us is we had a proprietary procurement system that made us quite a bit of money as well on a year-to-year basis. So the maths of that return is quite simple. Throughput needs to go up. You saw that there were some increases, but there were also some significant increases in throughput per unit. Operating expenses came down. When we got there was really some significant waste, not even local optima, just waste. Investment, in our case, actually came down. And here, I think, is one of the most significant under-marketed advantages that TOC holds. Out of the software, we learned that some of our molds are way more profitable to use than others. So what we did is we ran these molds as what we called capacity molds. And they are essentially eye plants. And we got these things to run at about 110% of their design capacity, which I didn't think was possible. And then we just used the other molds that we have as overflow molds. But what this allowed us to do is it allowed us to avoid significant capital investment. And CapEx is a cancer. For me, CapEx is a failure of imagination. You start building stuff when you can't figure out how to use that which you've got well. We learned how to do that. Secondly, what happened is we've all of a sudden found ourselves with significant excess capacity in certain locations. So we sold them. Over the years that we were there, we sold more equipment and plant than what we bought. Also, we didn't have to wait 3-4 years. These mills cost $250 million each. We didn't have to wait 3 to 4 years to build one of these puppies. We just made the product flow. Return on equity, therefore, is equal to return on capital, which you know, times leverage. Alan already referred to the fact that we did a management buyout in 2006. We did that predominantly with debt. We were fairly confident that we could make this company perform, so we were not scared of the debt. What was scary is we bought this company 2 days before Lehman Brothers fell over with hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and let's just say it was an interesting couple of weeks. So it's fairly simple. We combined operational leverage and financial leverage, and that's what drove the value for us. Keep in mind selling TOC as a capex avoidance mechanism. So some learnings from Premier. This was always odd to me, is that it seemed to me that Eli spent the first couple of years of his career on defining these flow principles. He wrote the goal, and that was a major hit. It also struck me that the last 30 years of his career, he tried to get us to get out of our own way. He tried to get us to think. And that was where all of these thinking tools were born, right? As Alan said, we set huge expectations, and we figured out how best to achieve that, regardless of the very nice hammer that we had. So a better TOC definition, or the part that deals with thinking, and this is what applies to us, and for me, this is where we generated value at Premier. It was a way of thinking that can substantially improve any situation by identifying and focusing on that which is truly important. I think that the flow part of TOC might just be our constraint. We love it. Why leave it unfinished? Well, I found Eli late in 2009, and I said, I'm tired of this. Throughput margins are too low. We're not making progress in the informal markets. It's not the ideal company to do this. He listened to me. He said, get on a plane immediately. We did so, and through the early part of 2010, we decided to joint venture on buying an apparel retail company in Europe. Alan was an integral part of that planning. Lots of strategy and tactics tree going on at the time. But unfortunately, first we had to sell Premier, and I had to find a successor we had to hand over properly. And unfortunately, as you know, it was a bad time. We literally just ran out of time, so we could never do it. So here's another mystery. And this is maybe the way that I can repay the favor that Eli paid me. We claim that TOC has a methodology that it can improve profit immensely over a short period. How did he say? Is it understood? Yes or no? We also claim that we can implement that methodology consistently and quickly. Right? We say that there are enough suitable companies. We know, we don't even claim, we know how to design a win-win offer. And we can sell these win-win offers. Right? Okay, so if all of those are true, there's a predicted effect. And excuse this particular one, is a little tongue-in-cheek. We should be seeing more money, right? So what does that tell you? One or all 5 of these assumptions are wrong. Because if they were true, that would be an inevitable outcome. You can take all the time you need to think about this. Just please do me a favor, invite me. I'd like to be a fly on the wall. So I'm not going to try. You people are very clever. You are very good at this. I am merely holding up that picture for you. If you want to go and try and find the causes and the effects in that. Let me just go through some suggestions in terms of what we learned and what we're doing these days. I would not waste my time again with a company that does not respond fast. So which companies respond fast? Well, find companies with high throughput percentages. We're working with an apparel company at the moment that has a 70% throughput percentage because they are vertically integrated. I'm not suggesting go and find manufacturing companies. Find ones that retail, and if they vertically integrated, that's better. Because you're going to make the sales grow anyway, so you may as well get the whole cake, right? Focus on that. Secondly, size does not need to be large to start with. You'll see for the couple of other reasons why. It just needs to be large when you're done with it. Current profit needs to be round about break even or slightly below. When you're working with a company that's very profitable, you can't really make a big difference, right? And do these people listen to you? No, they're so clever. At the same time, you don't want to be working with a company like Premier where there is an absolute crisis and a fire going on because it's defocusing. It burns energy and it gets you off track. So people that are around about break even, sweet spot. Find companies with room to grow. Companies that have low market share or have adjacent markets that you can go into or products that can go into the same channels that you have at this point in time. We were a bread company, and because of that meeting in Amsterdam, the next thing I was looking at nappies in Poland. And it took me a while to connect those dots. But the advantage was that we had a distribution channel into these markets that nobody else could match. So we could put any product on that. So find products, adjacent opportunities. Companies with room to deliver. CapEx, be careful. It's a lot better if these companies have spare capacities in their supply chain so that as you grow sales, you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, build new factories and things like that. They slow you down. End user facing, very important. It's difficult to tell a retailer what to do if you don't control them. So the point where the decision is made to interact with you, make sure you own that space. Management stability. How many people here have lost a contract because TOC CEO left? Almost everybody. Okay? Somebody that's entrenched, that's influential, and who's a TOC champion. Find shareholder stability. Long-term majority shareholders. People who can decide to share in the value created. Typically what we're talking about here are private companies because they tend to have CEOs that tend to be substantial shareholders or the majority shareholders. So they're not likely to get fired. They can make the decisions. They don't get thrown easily. Go and look in those sort of spaces. So that's what I would suggest as far as your targets are concerned. Implementations, why are quick results important? If we reduce the implementation time, return is increased. Return is time-based. Time is money, right? And your reputation is enhanced. The quicker we do this, the better off we are. If your implementation time increases, what happens? Your client gets change fatigue and risk of mistakes mount. We made a massive mistake near the end of Premier. I'm telling you that physically nearly killed me. And it's just because we took too long. Buy-in decreases. People get tired. Performance, by definition, because it takes long, is mediocre. The CEO eventually gets fired. Henry mentioned yesterday the half-life of the CEO is 18 months. That's way longer than what we take to implement. Or the current or the next CEO, even worse, fires us. And our reputation suffers. So we have this conflict that we work for fees. Fees are time-based. We have this incentive that we don't want to acknowledge that keeps us on site. And we want to fix everything because that takes longer. But under no circumstances is that in our long-term interest because performance suffers, you get fired, you don't have word of mouth. Second way that I can suggest reducing time is know what your end user wants. In most supply chains, as we said, push product. TOC responds backwards to what we assume the end user wants. And then, as we said, we proceed to build in the same direction that caused the problem in the first place. Okay? Now, I'd like you to do a little bit of a mental exercise with me. TOC has focused more and more on retail customers in the last number of years, right? More so. After Ellie's last book, it's a place where most of these principles really come to life. If you are advising one of those clients, how many of your suppliers can you get to truly replenish you? If you've got 30,000 SKUs on a shop floor, how many of those people you think are going to replenish you? Very little. So let's just think of a business that we own just that part. First, let's just test what it is that our clients want. So focus on the point of contact with the end user. Then we go and we do tests. We try and figure out what do people want, and we test, right? But we stuff up these tests because we've made these tests dependent on what the business can deliver. It has to replenish this product. Or my personal favorite is we just need to change this IT system and then we can go ahead. In a very simplistic way, to illustrate the point, this is what I would do if I had to do this again. I would take a couple of trucks, I don't care, 1, 3, however many is enough. I would stuff the back of that truck with whatever you think you need for the test. And then multiply it by 2. And then put people in the truck and put people in the store. And literally, as the product walks off the shelf, replenish it. Don't make it dependent on the business delivering things that it can't yet, because we're right in the beginning of the process. It can't deliver those things. And then learn. There are 2 advantages of this. Firstly, you figure out what your client wants, and if what you think he wants is not, then you can figure out how to do that. But way more importantly, you can now go to your customer and say, see, this works. We haven't done anything else. This works. The second point that I was trying to make earlier to speed up time is that we go and we implement from the left side. We put drum buffer rope in place and all of these things. If we imagine that we only own the retail portion, what do we do to buffer our suppliers' unreliability? So what I would suggest here is buffer your own business. The fact that you own the manufacturing and warehouse is by the by. If those 2 stations didn't belong to you, you wouldn't go in there and fix them, would you? So why, just because they belong to you, must now go and fix them? My suggestion would be speak to Henry, apply his principle. He'll manage your inventory for you. Seriously consider that. This is probably the place, this is where we might waste the most time. What if we turn the direction of this implementation around and stop as soon as it works? That's going to take a bit of time to sink in, I know. Take a couple of days. So let's make product available on the retail shelf. If that works, then stop. Don't go put drum buffer rope in the business, because that's you're going to waste 3 years. Stop it. Put measures in place, and if the business can deliver that, give the people in the business incentives, outsource your inventory management if it has to, but they will figure out what to do. What we don't have a problem with is those suppliers there. It doesn't bother us at all that we don't have to go fix their supply chain. But simply because we own these 2 steps, we want to go fix it. In environments where our clients tell us what they want, in other words, they buy from us, Alan and Goldratt Research Labs have a very good simulation model that does exactly that. It looks at when do you need to get inventory out of your own business and make it available to your customers. I would investigate that. Lastly, win-wins. Despite being able to create tremendous value, the TOC community predominantly earns fees. Some of our clients cannot share value and some won't. Yet, if we can deliver this claim, it's of incredible value. Business performance is probably the most sought-after commodity in the world. If you can make a difference, it is worth a fortune. What to change? There are a myriad of ways in which we could structure participation other than a fee. We could acquire a stake in the company later. We get an option on ownership instead of a profit share fee. We can acquire now, build one of these companies, use the value that you've built, raise funding on that, build the second and third one. We could raise a TOC fund, just trying to illustrate to you that there's tremendous value, and that's partly where a significant portion of the Premier value came from. So if I have to do this again, I would do it in this order. Target suitable companies, don't waste time. I'd run proper trials, figure out what people want. I'd reverse the direction of the solution. Then, very importantly, have a few successes. Once you've got that under the belt, go and sell proper value share deals. This is in order of necessity. You can't skip to the end without having done the first part. Nobody will back you financially unless you've shown that you can make this work 1 or 2 places. So start in that direction. Significantly pick viable targets, cut down the time, make them work, and then go partner. If I only made you aware of this today and got some thinking started on that, I would like to thank Eli specifically for the impact that he's had on Premier and on my and many other people's lives. And then his people on our site, AlanBarnard, Conrad Bartel, my own CEO, Basie van Dijk. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Best of luck.
Just some concluding remarks. I think Eli left us with 2 lessons before he passed away. He said, never say I know. And don't stand in my shadow, stand on my shoulders. Continuously challenge what we are doing. It was a real privilege working with Ian preparing this presentation because we had to go back and challenge some absolutely fundamental assumptions. We realized really the key starts off figuring out what will it take to get customers to be willing to pay more and buy more, and designing good tests for that. Once you figure that out, you figure out the effectiveness portion. And then you can say, okay, what do we need to make that really efficient, to supply that really efficiently? Constantly checking those assumptions. So I want to again thank Ian. He's put in a massive amount of effort preparing this presentation. We had major insights, as he said, during the project, figuring out most of the time what not to do. We could have done this much, much faster, created even more value. Thank you so much, Ian, to you and your team for working with us and preparing this. Thank you.